The night my father was beaten began like any other night I thought I still had control over. That is the lie every son tells himself right before everything collapses. I remember the sound first, the sharp echo of fists meeting bone somewhere behind me. The kind of sound that does not belong to movies or stories but to real life. The kind that stays in your ears long after the moment has passed. I remember turning around too late, seeing my father's body already between me and the men I had angered, his back taking the punishment meant for me, his arms still raised as if shielding a child who no longer deserved protection. In that moment, strength meant nothing. Pride meant nothing. All that mattered was the terrible realization settling into my chest like a stone. This was my fault. The ambulance lights painted the street in red and white, flashing like a warning I had ignored for years. My father lay on the stretcher, his face swollen, blood drying along his temple, his breath shallow and uneven. I kept saying his name as if saying it enough times would pull him back into the world I had broken. He did not answer. The paramedic told me to step back, to give them space, but there is no space wide enough when guilt has already wrapped itself around your throat. As they lifted him into the ambulance, I climbed in without asking, sitting there helpless, my hands shaking, my eyes fixed on the rise and fall of his chest, terrified that one rise might be his last. At the hospital, everything slowed down and sped up at the same time. Doctors spoke in fragments, machines beeped with cold indifference. Papers were placed in front of me to sign, and my hand barely worked, as if it belonged to someone else. I watched strangers take control of my father's body while I stood there, useless. The same way I had been useless when he needed me to make a better choice earlier that night. When they finally wheeled him into a room, tubes already attached, oxygen hissing softly, the weight of what I had done pressed down harder than any blow he had taken. My father had always been a quiet man. Not weak, never that, but controlled, steady, the kind of man who spoke with actions more than words. Growing up, I thought his silence meant distance. I did not understand that it meant discipline. When I was young, he would wake up before sunrise, go to work without complaint, come home tired but present. He never missed a school event, never forgot a promise. And yet, somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I was stronger than his lessons, smarter than his warnings, immune to consequences. That arrogance is what brought us here. He opened his eyes hours later, just briefly. When he saw me, his brow tightened, not in anger, but in concern, for me. That was the moment something inside me broke completely. A man lying in a hospital bed because of his son, still worried about that same son. I leaned closer, my voice barely working, apologizing over and over, words spilling out in desperation, trying to explain, trying to confess, trying to take responsibility. He raised his hand slightly, weak but deliberate, signaling me to stop. "Don't," he whispered, his voice rough, strained, yet firm enough to silence me instantly. I didn't understand at first. I thought he meant don't cry, don't panic, don't worry. But his eyes held something else, command, not comfort. He motioned for me to lean closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath through the oxygen mask. "You will not talk about this," he said, "to anyone." I froze. My mouth opened, ready to argue, to say I deserved whatever came, that people should know the truth, that this was my fault. Before I could speak, his fingers tightened slightly around my wrist, the last of his strength focused into that grip. "Listen to me," he said. "You will not tell them what happened. You will not say my son caused this. You will let them think whatever they want. You will protect your future." The words hit harder than the fists ever could. Protect my future, while he lay broken because of me? Tears burned my eyes, spilling down before I could stop them. I shook my head, unable to accept what he was asking. "I can't," I whispered. "I did this. I won't hide it." His expression hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. The same resolve I had seen when he worked double shifts, when he stood up to hardship without complaint, when he taught me right from wrong without raising his voice. "You will," he said, "because this is my choice." That was the first switch, the first reversal. The father who had always carried the burden was now choosing to carry my guilt as well. The doctors came in shortly after, pushing me aside gently, checking monitors, adjusting medications. My father closed his eyes again, exhausted, and I was left alone with the echo of his words. I sat there for hours, replaying every decision that led to that night. The people I associated with, the argument I refused to walk away from, the moment my father stepped forward when he should never have had to. Each memory cut deeper than the last. Family members arrived, questions followed. What happened? Who did this? Was it random? I heard myself answering with half-truths and vague explanations, my father's command pressing against my chest like a hand holding my heart in place. Every lie tasted bitter. Every omission felt like another betrayal. Yet I stayed silent, because he asked me to. Because even in that bed, he was still protecting me. As the night wore on, I watched the machines more than his face. Each beep became a reminder of time passing, of the fragile line between presence and loss. I realized then that strength was not what I thought it was. Strength was not fighting back. It was not winning arguments. It was not standing your ground out of pride. Strength was restraint. Strength was sacrifice. Strength was a father choosing silence so his son could still have a life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to undo everything. I wanted to trade places with him. Instead, all I could do was sit there, holding his hand, promising myself something I had never promised before. Not out loud, not clearly. If he survived this, I would change. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now. I would become the man he believed I could be, the man he was willing to suffer for. Just before dawn, he stirred again. His eyes opened briefly, finding mine. This time, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The message was already carved into me. The switch had been made. The burden had passed. And I knew, as the first light crept through the hospital window, that this night was only the beginning. Not just of his recovery, but of my reckoning. The days that followed blurred together in a way only hospital time can, where morning and night lose their meaning, and every sound becomes either a promise or a threat. And during those long hours sitting beside my father's bed, I began to understand the true weight of what he had done for me. Not just that night, but my entire life. Because while his body lay still beneath white sheets and humming machines, his presence filled the room more powerfully than ever, forcing me to face myself without distraction or escape. And as his condition wavered, one moment stable, the next frighteningly uncertain, I felt something inside me shift permanently, as if the careless boy who believed consequences belonged to other people was being stripped away piece by piece, replaced by a man who could no longer look away from responsibility. And when he finally regained enough strength to speak again, his voice weak but steady, he told me why silence mattered more than truth in this moment, explaining that the world is quick to judge but slow to forgive, that one mistake can define a man longer than a lifetime of effort, and that a father's duty does not end when his son grows tall or stubborn or lost. It only changes form. And he said he stepped in front of those blows because that is what he had been doing since the day I was born, standing between me and dangers I never saw, paying prices I never knew were being paid. And now that the cost had become visible, I was finally old enough to understand it. And he made me promise. Not just to stay silent, but to live differently. To let this pain mean something. To become a man whose discipline would one day protect others the way his had protected me. And as he spoke, I saw the years in his eyes, the years of restraint, of swallowed anger, of choosing work over rest and duty over comfort. And I realized that strength was never loud in our house because real strength does not need to announce itself. It simply endures. And when he drifted back into sleep, I stayed there, replaying his words, understanding that the switch between us was now complete, that the role he had carried alone for decades was being handed to me without ceremony or applause. And from that moment forward, every choice I made would either honor his sacrifice or betray it. And when he was finally discharged weeks later, weaker in body but unbroken in spirit, I walked beside him differently than I ever had before. Not as a careless son, but as a guardian of the man who once carried me on his shoulders. And life did not suddenly become easy or clean or free of temptation, but it became clear, painfully clear, that every shortcut I once chased had nearly cost me the person I could least afford to lose. And I learned to walk away from situations that once fed my ego, to choose silence where I once chose confrontation, to build discipline where I once relied on luck, Because every time I felt myself slipping, I saw him on that stretcher again, his body between me and my own recklessness. And I understood that strength is built in moments no one sees, in choices no one applauds, in restraint that feels invisible but shapes destiny. And today, when people look at me, they see a man who seems calm, focused, grounded, but they do not see the night that forged that discipline. They do not hear the quiet voice of a father who chose to be blamed so his son could be spared. And that is exactly how he wanted it. Because some lessons are not meant to be explained, they are meant to be lived. And if you are listening to this and you still believe strength means winning arguments, proving points, or reacting to every challenge, remember this story. Remember that the strongest men are often the quietest, that the deepest love is often expressed through sacrifice no one ever hears about, and that one moment of humility can redirect an entire life. Because when the switch finally comes, when the child must become the protector, it does not ask if you are ready. It simply demands that you rise. And true strength is answering that call without excuses, without noise, and without ever forgetting who paid the price to teach you what it means to stand firm.